Speculation stream. Huge episode for you guys today. I am so freaking excited because I've got Black Plasma Studios, Knight of Doom, on with us today. Knight, what's going on, man?
What's up, everybody? Thanks for having me on. What should I call you? Game Guru? Game Guru guy?
Kodiak.
Kodiak. Kodiak, there you go, right. What's up, Kodiak? So glad to be on and ready to talk about some Hytale speculation and just some questions about Black Plasma if you have them. And I'm just glad to be on here and answering you guys' questions.
All right, so here's the deal, guys. I've got a ton of questions written out that we're going to talk about with Knight here, but if you have questions, I'm going to try and read the chat as best I can. Anything that kind of fits into the conversation, I'll throw it in. But let's start with the basics. Let's start ground floor. Tell us a little bit about Black Plasma Studios.
So Black Plasma Studios, currently with 7 animators now, as of yesterday, when Amelito released his first animation. We are a group of independent animation creators who all upload to the same channel, and we all kind of give each other feedback and critique on our animations, and we make Minecraft. Yeah, there's 7 of us. Arbiter617 is the leader of the channel, but then we've also got Thomas, Sam, Nitrox, myself, Skyfall, and Amelito. And we all make Minecraft animations, and for a lot of us, it's a full-time job. For me personally, it's a part-time job because I'm still in school. Yeah, we started out making Halo Machinimas as a channel, and this was long before my time, but then we started making Minecraft animations, and when those started doing well, we just kind of all started working on those, and that's what our channel is today. And we're really excited to look into doing Hytale content when that game comes out, but for the time being, with no release date in sight, probably going to be dropping sometime in 2020, I presume.
Who knows?
We're just going to be, yeah, who knows. I'm just excited to come on and talk about Hytale and any animation questions you have, or.
All right, so tell me how you got involved in Black Plasma Studios. Let's start there.
So, from the very beginning, there was one day I was I was on vacation and Skywars Mega popped up into my recommended, and this thing was a Minecraft animation. It had like 2 million views. I made it into my premiered on YouTube or whatever it's called. I watched that and I thought that was so cool to have like a Minecraft animation, and I started checking out the Black Plasma channel, and I saw that there were some animation like creation guides on it. So I'm like, you know what? I'm gonna try to create my own animation. All I had at the time was a really crappy laptop, so I did a couple of tests and it turned out okay. I found out that I had a knack for kind of timing like character motions, and they look pretty fluid, but I couldn't work on a slow laptop. So I kind of jumped the gun, blew most of my savings up until that point on a really expensive computer, but that's because I wanted to make Minecraft animations and try to join the channel, and that's what I ended up doing. So about a year after I got my computer, I'd been working on an animation with another really talented guy, goes by Mark Cotto, and he created the story and music from my first animation in the fall. And I created that, and the first draft, typically a lot of people apply multiple times to Black Plasma Studios, but I gotten involved before. Like, I was a builder for Arbiter's Songs of War series that's about to come out sometime within the next year or so. So I built for them. I created models, weapon models for ROA Nitrox. And I got involved, I played games with them, and just overall just got involved in the community. So when I applied for Animator with my first draft, it was a full 5-minute, 30-second long draft of the animation. It was good enough to the point where they said, okay, you've been around for a while, so we'll help you improve on your lighting, improve on your animation, and this could potentially go on the channel. So after another 3 or 4 months of working on it and making improvements, then my first animation was released in the fall, and that's kind of how I got involved.
So you mentioned that a lot of people apply to Black Plasma Studios, but you kind of got yourself into the community, started to work with some of the guys as a builder. Just go through, you really took a risk here, right? You had this crappy laptop and you're like, I want to do this. I'm going to go for it. That's got to be kind of nerve-wracking for you.
Yeah, a little bit. I mean, there were reasons I wanted a better computer anyways, but my laptop was fine for the time. I had that thing for like, 5 years? But it served its purpose, and I still use it to this day, so it's a fine laptop. But if I wanted to make animations on the scale that I had wanted to, I needed to invest in something bigger, and I invested in this computer. And yes, it was kind of a jump because that was pretty much all I had at the time, being, 15? I don't know. I'm 17 now. I was 15 at the time, but I had a passion, I went for it, and it worked out. I mean, I got involved, and I think that was a very large part of it, just getting to know the other animators and getting familiar with them, learning their memes,
Oh, of course.
and just getting just talking to the community and just getting involved.
All right, so being an animator, like this is not obviously Black Plasma is a studio in itself, but this is not like a Disney studio or a DreamWorks studio where there's hundreds of people doing very specific jobs. You guys have to do everything. So
Every single
when I say you're an animator, what does that actually entail?
So typically when you think animator, you think someone, okay, who they pose the bones, maybe animate the characters. Well, at Black Plasma Studios, as animators, we're responsible for first off creating the story, oftentimes creating our sets, putting all that into Blender, then creating all of our assets for our animation if we want anything custom, which is becoming more and more commonplace, then putting in our characters, putting in Patreon since we have supporters, incorporating them into the stories, and then animating the whole story, lighting, compositing, everything in Blender. That we use Blender 3D as our animation software. Everything in Blender. Then we critique each other. That's pretty much the main element of teamwork that we have. Is when we're animating, we meet up once a week and then a couple times in between for critiques. So we all show like drafts of what we've made that week, and then we'll say, okay, maybe this can be improved. And then give suggestions to each other. So we're constantly building off of each other and giving each other suggestions to create the highest quality animations that we can. And then once we're done the animations, then we got to render, and then we have to do all of the video editing on our own as well. So that includes all the sound design, finding all the sounds, and then once all of that's done, then we're also responsible for what we've been doing within the past year is making like bloopers for our animations. And Arbiter is really good about helping out about those. So he'll sometimes take some scenes and help us make a few bloopers, which is basically scenes from the animation and just kind of adjust it a little bit to have funny alternative endings. Like in Thomas's Battle Royale, there's one scene where one character jumps from one car to another car. Well, in the blooper, say he jumped from the car, but then he missed and got run over by the car and died. So,
Nice.
yeah. So after all that, after all the animation process, making the bloopers, a lot of times the behind the scenes, then we upload all that, and that is a 2 to 3 month process for everyone working full time. I am not that fast at the moment, working on it, but yeah, that's why it's nice to have a larger team, so we can all spend 2, 3, 4 months on better, higher quality animations and have them released kind of staggered. So we still keep up our channel's consistency, but we can also keep up the quality. But yeah, being an animator at Black Plasma Studios really means you get the full spectrum of everything. Like you're not just animating, you're doing everything for your video. So
Right.
every video that you see, like Arbiter, he animated the full 55 minutes of animation life full, all on his own. And
Unbelievable.
yeah, all the other things that he's done, he's crazy.
All right, so we were talking before before we went live, and we were talking about the fact that you guys are all remote. You guys do this never coming face to face with each other. Are there challenges with that, or do you find that to be kind of the future of animation?
I think that there's not too many challenges presented. Like from when Arbiter and Sam lived together, there was definitely benefits that they talked about, like just being able to share ideas over a meal, or just being able to be right there to give feedback or just talk about stuff. But really, since our style of animation is we do everything on our own, the fact that it's remote gives us time to just do our own thing for a couple days, then check in. And I don't think that really has any effect on our workflow. So I think remote is definitely going to become more and more popular, especially like when you're like the bigger studios, when they need to outsource stuff. You don't have everybody in one room. You can just outsource to different people, and they can send back what they've done so far. And we have a pretty efficient system here, so I think it's fine doing it remotely.
All right, so let's start getting into the meat and potatoes of this. The reason why people came. So you as an animator, what's your biggest challenge?
My biggest challenge is easily time management. Being in school, having to animate, animations taking so long, me having to do so much stuff, having to keep up with a lot of people, lots of critiques, lots of other people involved, and like I mentioned to you before, not on stream yet though, I also have a kind of Hytale side project going on, so I'm also leading that team too. So just a lot of management, a lot of work needing to be done, and not all the time in the world to do it. So I would say definitely time management.
And so you mentioned that you're a student. When you come home, I imagine you're working on this stuff just like how we work on the Game Gurus every night when I come home. How do you get through that? I run into these blockages all the time where I'm like, man, I just don't have the energy to put in 3 or 4 more hours at night after I just worked
Right.
a 8-hour, 9-hour day. How do you do that?
Right. So a lot of times what I'll do is school is always first priority for me. So what I'll do is I'll get done any homework that I have. This past year was pretty rough because I took this is going to be my last year of high school, but I took 5 college courses, 5 of my 8, and I was still a junior in high school. So that was a huge workload. So I come home, I work for like 2 hours on homework after 8 hours of school. And oftentimes I'd be really tired, and that actually hindered my progress a lot because I was so tired. But when weekends are my best time for working, like I'll definitely capitalize on weekends. And sometimes I just started waking up early before school to work on it. Especially the last week before my Paradise Lost animation released, I'd be up before school hours, and then I'd be working on it after school hours, and I'd be up late working on it. And of course, that's not something I can sustain forever.
Right.
But it's really just finding all the little gap times and minimizing gameplay. Like
Right.
I'd play Final Fantasy, but I mean, I have to keep that to maybe 2 or 3 hours a week at the maximum, especially during school, if I want to have time to animate.
Right.
So.
And for an MMO, that's not a lot of time.
Yeah, that's not a lot of time.
2-3 hours is like logging in, checking your mail, doing one quest, and then okay, I guess time's up.
Yep.
That's funny. All right, so let's start at the very beginning. Probably have a lot of new animators or potential animators in the chat or watching the stream, or will watch the stream after the fact. What's the first step? What's the first thing you have to do to be, as an animator?
The first thing you have to do as an animator is, just as the name says, to animate. How I started was I just put in a character rig. You can find tons of rigs of all different sizes and shapes and forms and whatever on the internet. Black Plasma provides their own rig, custom made, also a bunch of custom made mob rigs. You can find that on the Black Plasma community channel. And what you do is you start keyframing it, get familiar with animation itself, get your character moving fluidly, and then just start playing with stuff a little bigger and a little bigger. So first thing I made was just a guy placing blocks, like walking and placing blocks. The second thing I did was 2 people having like a 10-second little fist fight. And even though it didn't turn out well, I was still just getting a feel for animation. So the first thing I would say for an animator is just to animate, get used to it, and improve on your timing and your just character motion. And that's the biggest thing, because a lot of applications that I see for Black Plasma Studios, a lot of them are very like stiff and linear, and it just doesn't look very visually appealing. But the people who take the time to kind of learn animation, get familiar with it, you can tell because their motions are more fluid and it's just better to watch. So I would just say animate if you want to become an animator and go from there.
So what about stepping back? So you've gotten your animation chops up, you've got some of the basics down. What about storyboarding or coming up with the ideas? Where do you guys come up with these crazy concepts? Obviously, things like the Battle Royale video is topical, right? It's kind of what's hot in the world right now. But a lot of these are really unique ideas that must come from someplace deep within your brain. How do you do that?
Right. So the way Black Plasma started was Hypixel, and that's part of the reason why we're so excited for Hytale. Anyways, Hypixel has a lot of mini games, and we have like Blocking Dead, Skywars Mega, Hole in the Wall, stuff like that. So we started out with Hypixel mini games, and from there we started just when original story ideas would come up, we found that the Derp character was really liked by a lot of people. So we kind of started moving in the independent story direction with him, but then we got Skyfall and other animators just started working on more original content, and that's kind of where the direction of BPS started going, because people tend to like original animations more because you get to learn new characters and have like character development, because instead of mini games where you're just kind of playing a mini game a lot of times, you get to like learn a character and go through a story with a character and see the character's emotions and all that. And a lot of it, when we're brainstorming animations, we'll bring it up with the rest of the team and we're all pitching ideas. Like the one I'm working on now is Tiny Derp. So there was a giant derp animation, and that was like nothing you've seen before. He got hit by magic, and he turned giant, and he's rampaging the city, he's destroying everything. So now it's going to be the opposite. He's going to be shrunk down really tiny, but it's a completely different storyline. Like he has a whole new set of challenges. He goes through a whole new set of complications, and it's really just kind of I don't know where inspiration comes from. Spur of the moment things, maybe Minecraft related things. Arbiter's most famous one, animation. Well, I guess his most famous one's Walking Dead, but his most recent one, Animation Life, um, came from him just really liking Blender, I guess, and being like, what if I incorporated all the Blender stuff into an animation? So it's like the best of both worlds. Like people get to see what Blender's kind of like, and I get to do some cool computery stuff, and also still have it be Minecraft and tell a story. So just random things like that, and that's where our stories come from.
All right, so you mentioned Hightail. Let's start talking about Hightail here. I want to make sure that we can get to that because that's kind of what we're all excited about as a community.
Right.
As you know, after talking to you, I know you're excited about Hightail. Where do you think
Yes, sir.
some of? Well, let's start here. What are you most excited about with Hightail?
I'm excited about, well, the game, first of all, because it sounds like they're really going to be pushing an awesome story. They've got lots of dungeons and prefabs and caves and different zones. They've got like a whole lore behind it. And like I said, being a Final Fantasy player and getting involved in some more story-oriented Minecraft servers, I'm a guy who really likes to play through a story and enjoy a really good story where you get to go through and explore things and uncover like lore. That's not the same for other people, of course. I'd say first and foremost for me personally would be to explore the story in the world of Hytale. And they've got some really cool creatures, like seeing the little Quebecs and all the um, different mobs and zones that they have. And I'm just really interested to get in and exploring that. But equally as interesting to me is what they're doing with content creation. Like in the trailer, they had a little segment where it's like make your own videos, and they had like little explosions and a guy running. The implications for machinimators, people who like to make the in-game recorded content, like Black Plasma actually started with making Halo, that's going to be huge because Minecraft is really stiff and doesn't have a lot of um, opportunities for content creators to make emotional or like involved machinimas. But I think Hytale's really going to hit on that. So I'm equally as excited for the video creation aspect as well as just the story playthrough and the world and the adventure aspect of Hytale.
All right, so we got a question here from Redacted. Knight, what are you expecting from the Hytale Movie Maker? Do you think that's going to be something that replaces Blender and kind of your process? Do you think you're going to be able to do everything with Hytale tools?
I've yet to see. I've played around a little bit with the base software that they based the Hytale Movie Maker off of, but nothing much. I think that what's going to end up happening is going to be possibly even a combination of both Blender and Hytale Movie Maker, because Blender has some capabilities like with this texturing and cycles, and then even the new what's called the Eevee engine, which allows for real-time lighting and some really awesome compositing. There's some stuff in Blender that just can't be done anywhere else because unless it's like some other really expensive 3D software. But the Hytale Movie Maker is definitely going to be great for creating models. And what I really like about that is you can work on it in real time with other people, which is a feature that not many softwares have. Blender doesn't have it. So like I could be working on modeling something and then I can have a texture artist working on texturing it at the same time. And I don't think it's going to completely replace Blender, but I think it's going to have a lot of usefulness. And I'm definitely looking forward to using it and seeing where it's going to be applicable.
Yeah, for a studio like BPS, where you guys are all remote, but you're all collaborators in some sense, that seems like it could have real implications, right? You're working on something and maybe Arbiter's helping you out, and you guys can both be working on something in real time. That's a big step up in terms of efficiency.
Yes, it is. And especially if it turns out that animation is going to be really good in there. Like you could have multiple people animating multiple characters, like standing around the sides or in different shots at different times, as long as that all checks out. And that could be really huge for progress. I mean, the way that Black Plasma works, that we're all kind of our own independent creators anyways, but I'm sure that we'll find some way that to use that to our advantage to help speed things along and make things more efficient. And there's also other like outside people too, like I said, texture artists.
Mm-hmm.
So we do a lot of our own prop creation, and them being able to work on like textures while we're making them, it's going to be a huge implication for speed as well.
Going back to your animation process for a quick second, what do you find to be most challenging for you personally when you're doing an animation? Besides the time management thing, what technical thing do you find to be the most challenging?
I would say, as far as time-based compositing, because it takes a really long time to get a scene looking nice and lighted nice, because you have to re-render and re-render and re-render every single time that you're checking out something, because it has to put the compositing layer on at the end of when the image renders. But the other thing that I don't like is how long polishing the animation takes. Like you put down your base layer of keyframing and all that, and it looks decent, but you have to go into what's called a dope sheet and you have to mess with a lot of the animation curves, and that can oftentimes take a really long time. I'm getting faster with it now that I'm working with it more, but that takes a really long time to clean up some animation sometimes, and you're not really seeing a result as you're doing that. Like you're seeing small ones, and it all goes towards the quality of the overall video, but it's not something that's as fast as when you're creating a block out or you're going through the first couple animation passes and you get to see your characters come to life. This is just kind of smoothing up stuff. So for me, that's the biggest drag.
All right. So what about when you're moving fast, you're doing well? Like, what's the thing that you enjoy the most? Going the opposite direction. What's the thing that you really feel like this is where you thrive in the animation world?
My favorite part of any animation is really just the initial block out, because I kind of get to put the characters in, see how it's going to play out, see what moments are going to be funny, get to play around with camera shots, get to do some cool experimental stuff. And as I'm doing that, I also oftentimes get more ideas off script of what I can do with the animation to make it even more interesting or even more fun for the viewers as well as myself. So I really like the block out process as well as the kind of first animation pass, because that's where you get to see everything start to come to life.
Gotcha. All right. So, what does Hytale need to do in order to be successful for a team like BPS? You know, obviously, you mentioned that Minecraft's tools are very rigid. They're not well developed, if you will. What does Hytale need to do to make sure that the content creators, the people like you and Thomas and Arbiter, are going to be in a good place when the game comes out?
Um, it's hard to tell at the moment just because it's so far out from release. A lot of it's going to be just, first of all, getting into the YouTube algorithm to make it get quite a few views. But I think overall, just ease of use of like creating animations in Machinima.
Mhm.
Not really. I don't really have a clear answer on that one, but just making it easier for us as content and others as content creators to create content and be efficient about it and not have to go back and make a lot of small adjustments and reshoot a lot of things because they didn't turn out well. So just a lot of small, I guess, optimizations in the content creation area. But yeah, I don't have a
It's
too sure answer on that.
it's really about the quality of life, making sure that it's
Yeah,
not more of a
yeah, that's a good
hassle
word.
for you guys to animate. It should be something that helps your animation process, not gets in the way of it.
Right.
All right, let's talk about Hytale for a second. What's your favorite faction right now?
Faction. Let's see. uh, Give me a list.
All right, so Zone 1, we've got the Quebecs and the Twerks. Zone 2, we got the Farons and the Scarix. Zone 3, we got the Outlanders. And then, you know, we got like skeletons, and then we got the Void Dragons and things like that. I guess let's change the question. I don't want to put you on the spot like that. Anything
All
that you've
right.
seen in the concept art or anything in the screen caps or the videos they've released that really gets you excited about the game?
One of the things that stood out to me, and I guess taking this as a base for other things that they're going to do with the game, is just the Quebecs themselves in the Zone 1. Um, Hearing the music for the Quebec Zone and just seeing their character models and that they have their own personalities, I think that's really cool. They have like NPC diversity among their mobs. Minecraft kind of just has the villagers and they just kind of, at you. And that's not very interesting. But to have little creatures that look like they belong in a tree environment, or having skeletons that look like they belong in a um, desert environment, that's going to be really cool to tie into the game. But yeah, I think I'm going to go with the Quebecs on this one, and just how unique they are, and the whole zone itself.
All right, so you're an animator, but you're also a gamer. What are the things, the features that, from somebody that's, I assume, played quite a bit of Minecraft in the day,
Mhm.
what are some of the features that you want to see in Hytale?
I want to see a steady progression of, first of all, lore, like I said, and I think that they're hitting on that pretty hard with a lot of their prefabs and overarching like story, their different zones and all that, their different worlds. But I want to see a lot of in-game stuff, like a lot of in-game diversity. Because one thing that Minecraft doesn't do well is once you get diamonds and you get enchantments, that's kind of it. Like
Mm,
you beat the Ender Dragon, that's kind of it. You don't really have anything else to do. You just get more resources, maybe build something, but there's no other like challenging things to go on. Whereas Hytale, what they could do well is with different dungeons and different bosses and different mobs, different zones, introduce a lot of challenges for even once you get to the end game. That's one thing, like being a gamer like myself, playing Final Fantasy. What they're always doing is they're releasing new patches every few months with these extreme bosses, and you have to learn these new mechanics, and they're really hard fights, and they take hours to learn how to beat this boss. And one thing that Hytale could do, I mean, not just fighting in general, just more in-game stuff to do, resource collection wise too. So you can like craft new items, create new glamours, if you will. Just have more for players to do in the end game, because I think that's something that Minecraft kind of lacks.
right. And
But
let's
other games
talk
have
let's talk
well.
MMO fan to MMO fan here. We were talking before the stream about how I used to play WoW. You play Final Fantasy now. One of the things that came out of the interview with Noxie was that all the bosses, all the dungeons have to be in a place where they can be soloable. And for somebody that's a huge MMO fan, that's kind of a drag for me. What are your thoughts on that?
I understand where he's coming from on that, because a lot of people are going to be playing single player and they're
Right.
going to need places to like hide from boss mechanics so they don't get hit, or like an open area for certain bosses so they have space to maneuver. Being an MMO player like yourself, I do like the team aspect that's involved with a lot of those like dungeons and bosses, because excuse me, in Final Fantasy, the minimum you can have on a team is four. It's like
Right.
a tank, a healer, and two damage dealers, and then other bosses like eight people. So it revolves around a team aspect of fighting a boss. Whereas Hytale, just because it can be played in single player and multiplayer, is going to have to focus more on the single player mechanics, and I get that. You're going to have bosses that one player can survive on their own, and even though that's going to make them less challenging, maybe, I think that's going to be necessary for the game. And I think that with Hytale being so able to be modded and changed by the players themselves, I think that there's going to be player additions to bosses that can be like fought with teams or whatever, if that's what somebody wants to do. So I think that that's going to be fine for the base game itself, though.
Absolutely. In terms of the biomes, the different zones we've seen so far, anything that sticks out to you, something that's already given you some inspiration in terms of possible animations or places you want to do animations?
So far, the coolest one that I've seen was Zone 4, where it kind of has the, I believe, the kind of lava top, but then down below, it's got this nice forest, lush underground. I thought
Yep.
that was kind of interesting to have, and all the zones are almost like that, where the top is kind of different from what's underneath.
Right.
That almost reminds me of a Terraria type game, where
Mm-hmm.
you go
Mm-hmm.
down, there's like all sorts of different zones. So I really like to see that incorporated.
Yeah, we're all. I
Um,
think we're all pretty excited for the underground zone 4 with the Slothians, and just there's so much
yeah,
potential there for such a unique zone. Just putting a jungle underground, it's like, oh, that's a
right.
great idea. Why has nobody done that before?
Right. Um, shoot, lost. Oh, inspiration. Right. So, so right now, I actually do have plans to create a Hytale animation. A lot of details I'm not going to disclose for that, but it's going to be pretty straightforward. There's going to be some stuff from Zone One. There's going to be a little bit of the Quebecs in there. There's going to be a little bit of the creatures from there. But until the game releases and I get to see a lot of the zones firsthand and we get to experience them as players, I don't want to go too far into Hytale. And the one that I'm going to make initially is going to be kind of surface level, what we've seen, very understandable, and not delving too deep into any lore or story or zones that I don't understand well enough yet to incorporate into a story. But yeah.
Gotcha. Do you mind if we? I know you sent me a few pieces of art that you've worked on. Do you mind if we take a look specifically at the dragon?
Sure.
All right, so let's pop over to that really quick. I'll pull it up here. And for anybody that doesn't know, here I'm going to transition, and here we go. All right, so you've already started making some elements. Right now on the screen, we've got the dragon chasing the little Hytale swordsman. Talk to us about where this came from.
So this is a project that I started around in February. It's kind of tailed off right now just because my efforts are focused on my third Minecraft animation. But after the trailer, I was like, wouldn't it be cool to make a Hytale animation because it's similar enough to Minecraft and there's a lot of more possibility for the art and other things that you could do with the game and the zones and the buildings and all that. So the dragon being featured for a moment in the trailer and also in the thumbnail, a different kind of dragon, I thought that was a really cool creature to have, and it was different than the Minecraft dragon, which is kind of black and just kind of blocky. Whereas this dragon looked more interesting, looked more menacing, and I'm like, you know what? I'm gonna make a story with a dragon in it. So we got to work on a dragon, and working with a rigger, a texture artist, and myself as an animator. It took us about, I would say, a month from start to finish, just to finish that, rig it up, and have it looking nice. But that was definitely a really big achievement for us.
All right, taking a quick step back for anybody who doesn't know, you've mentioned rigging, you've mentioned textures, you mentioned animating multiple times through the interview. Let's very basically, couple sentences. What does a rigger do?
A rigger. So basically, how you start out a how you're able to animate a character is first you have a model, and it's typically a lot of blocks or a lot of shapes, but it's really hard to move them around. What a rigger does is they put what's called bones in the model, and they what they do, what rigging is controlling what moving those bones moves. Like our Minecraft's character has two arm bones. The top shoulder bone moves the entire arm, whereas like the wrist bone moves only the front half of the arm. And the rigger's responsible for making those movements possible
Okay.
so the animator can animate.
All right, so the texture person then?
Texture person, just as the name suggests, creates the textures, and then we put the textures on the model, which gets rigged, and then that goes to the animator to be able to create the animation.
So this one piece right here is a three-person job.
Essentially, yes.
Sorry, I'm responding to Hugo in the chat. He told me to raise my left arm. All right. So one thing that I've been thinking about getting ready for this interview was there's a lot of kind of Hytale is a step up in terms of complexity when it comes to character models, textures, things like that. Is that going to make your job a lot harder as an animator?
Yes and no. So what that does with a lot of more like work implication that also allows a lot more creative freedom. So as an animator, I actually enjoy that more because now I'm able to do more with this and create more things that I can animate and tell a story with, even though it's going to require a little more work. Um, all that means is just me getting together a slightly bigger team to make that workflow more efficient and being able to still produce the same quality content in the same amount of time. So it just requires more people working on it, but I don't think as an animator that creates any more hassle because being an animator, really that's just moving the bones and animating the characters.
Now, if you had to, would you be able to do all of the rigging, texture work, sound design? Would you be able to do that all yourself?
It would take a while to learn. At the moment, no, I could not.
So you and that's part of why you work with BPS, right? They are the
Yes.
reason you have those resources.
And not even just the animators themselves. Like we have other people who volunteer. A lot of them are volunteers actually, and we're really appreciative of their help just to rig and texture things for us and to model things for us. And that's so we can focus more, since we already have so much on our plates making our animations from start to finish. All that volunteer help really helps speed things along. And in return, we get to like credit them in our animations, and they get to see their name in the credits on like a million views video. So that's really cool for them too. And that's kind of how I started getting involved with BPS, was just kind of volunteering, helping out with the animations. And it's really cool just to be a part of a project that comes together as an animation that gets viewed by a lot of people.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's yeah, it takes a team.
So just to clarify, because there's a little confusion in the chat, the dragon that we were just looking at was not something that was built in Hytale. It was built in Blender, inspired by Hytale, correct?
It was entirely customly made from scratch by me and my team. Yes.
Right. All right. So now I've got the backpack pulled up. Why'd you make a backpack? What was this all about?
So a lot of what the story is going to be, the one that we have planned, is there's going to be what the premises of it is there's going to be two boys and they're going on a I would say quest for something. So when you're going on an adventure, you're going to need a backpack to carry stuff.
You need a
And
backpack.
in the yep, you can carry food, you can carry water, whatever you think, maybe a weapon in there. Um, But in the trailer, there was a brief moment where two guys were walking along a plateau, I believe, and one of them had a backpack on. We're like, you know what? Let's make a Hightail backpack.
Yep, yep. What does Hugo say here? Do you think servers will create animations for every single little detail? For example, on a lobby, it would be cool to see a grappling hook with cool animations on the players when swinging. I don't really know what he's asking there, but yeah, what do you? All right, let's talk about BPS's plan for servers. Do you guys, say you need to collect elements within the game itself? How do you do that? Obviously, say there's something in the game that you want to use the movie making tools in the game. Are you guys going to have your own server to do that? Is it going to be a private server?
We're not entirely sure yet, just because the game's so far out from release. So again, I don't have a definite answer for that.
You hold your tongue. The game's coming out next
Yeah.
week.
um, well, if the game's coming out next week, then we'd probably be thinking about opening up some kind of server. I don't know. I definitely know I would, and I'm not really sure. I'm not prepared for this.
I know we're not either, which is why I try and ask people what their plans are, because there's so much that we still don't know yet, and that's got to be it's exciting, but it's also kind of nerve wracking. As you know, obviously you have
Right.
a huge community of players and animators that are going to want to be involved with BPS. So there's a lot that you guys are going to have to figure out to make that all happen.
Right. And the main thing as far as like Hytale animation for me, when the game actually comes out, the first thing they'll probably be doing is experimenting with a machinima and animation kind of combination. So a lot of the story can be told with machinima, a lot of the less more like dialogue parts, less actiony parts. When it would get to a point where it's like a boss fight or something, I would plan to go into an animated state for that and have some really cool moves and explosions or whatever going on. That's the main thing I want to start playing around with when Hytale releases as a content creator for Black Plasma Studios. I don't know too much about server side things, but that's definitely something that we would explore when the game comes out or when we know it's going to come out.
Right. All right. So I have the Yeti diagram pulled up here. Now I'm looking at a bunch of colorful blocks, and a lot of people probably don't know what this is. Can you kind of walk us through what this Yeti diagram is?
So, our awesome texture artist, Pixel Heart, created this. She's our main texture artist, and actually pretty much our only one. She created the thing for the dragon. She's created the backpack. She's done everything. So huge shout out to her. Anyways, for that, first of all, when you're creating a mob, we always start with a block out, is what we call it. And what we do is we kind of block out a model. And what she has to do then as the texturer is create a texture for every single piece of that model. So she's got to like lay out where the head's going to be, where the horn's going to be, and then she's got to create a texture that's the correct size that can fit on that area. And that's actually what we have in progress right now. Like the Yeti is our current mob in progress, so that's not entirely done yet. But yeah, what that diagram is partially for our rigger, so he knows where to rig and like what to mess with to bring the Yeti to life and make it easy for me to animate it. And it's also there for Pixel to put on the texture and bring the Yeti to life as far as it looks.
So this is going to be part of your storyline, right? And so this is what you would say is the beginning phase of the animation process. You're making all of your characters, all your assets, basically, right? This happens
Yep.
before any of the story is laid out, which you mentioned was the blocking phase, I believe you called it. So
Yeah, I call that block out. So yeah,
Block
the first part of any animation is pre-production, and this all falls under pre-production.
Now, the Yeti itself is a relatively blocky character. For something like this, to take this Yeti from start to finish, how long would that take, you think, to get it ready to be in a movie?
Depends on how hard we push it. If we push it really hard, maybe a week. We're kind of going at a more casual pace right now because my efforts are focused on getting out the animation I'm working on right now. So it's probably going to take closer to a month. But as soon as I finish the animation I'm working on now, I'm actually going to go right in and start working on the Hightail animation. But we already have like 80% of our assets made for the animation, so the team's kind of taking it a little easy right now. But yeah, we can push it in probably a week. The dragon was pushed in, I believe, 2 or 3. And the other challenge with Hightail is that everyone here has been used to working with Minecraft. Very simplistic design, very blocky. In Hightail, we had a lot of problems with the character model because, especially like the hands being separated from the arms themselves and the arms being way longer than the Minecraft arms, that was really weird for us to kind of figure out scaling and how to rig that and to make it look good. And we're still making small adjustments to that to make it look better. So there's definitely a challenge there with just Hightail style in general. but we're getting more used to it, and it's coming along really nicely.
All right, so let's move on. We talked about some character rigging and things like that. Let's move on to world stuff. I guess for somebody that doesn't know a lot about animation and the animation that you guys do, when you need to create a world, what do you do?
So typically in Minecraft, a lot of us are actually builders. So myself, Sam, Thomas, and Arbiter are all four builders. Like we build a lot of our sets. And what I'm doing for Hytale in this case is I'm doing a Minecraft based set. Like I'm making the build in Minecraft, but I'm having our texture artist create extremely close looking textures to what we saw in the Hytale trailer. And I'm just swapping out the Minecraft blocks for Hytale textures. And that's going to be the easiest and quickest way for us to do that, and that's still tedious because we don't have any of the Hightail assets, any of the textures for us to use. So we're having to make those all from scratch. But as far as world creation and for our animations, we either use the Hightail or the Hypixel ones, which have already been built. Like in a lot of Arbiter's animation, he uses a lot of Hypixel things. In Thomas's more recent battle royales, he like takes a map and then he actually no, he makes it in World Painter and then he builds some custom things on it himself. So yeah, we do a lot of that on our own too.
So again, it's probably a stupid question, but again, I want to make sure that everybody's on the same page here. So
Sure.
you're building this in a game. You're building this in
Yes.
Minecraft in Hytale. You mentioned something just there called World Painter, which I'm not quite sure what that is. So explain to us what that is.
So World Painter is basically a software that can be used to create terrain in Minecraft really quickly and then import that into the world. So it just saves you a lot of building time.
Gotcha. So you can do everything kind of in a separate program and just pipe it into your game.
Yep. And then all the small minor adjustments you can do in game yourself.
Now, when you say you can create the world, you can make quick changes. Are you talking about full blown buildings and things like that? Or are you just talking terrain and trees and things like that?
World Painter is terrain and trees. When you're making adjustments yourself, that's typically going to be like your houses, your if you have like a runway or something, you're going to be making that yourself. But then that's where tools like World Edit and Voxel Sniper, some of the Minecraft plugins come into play and make those a lot easier. We even have a building team at Black Plasma Studios that pitches in a lot of times when we have big build projects, like for Sam's most recent animation, Worlds Apart, where he has like this giant fortress, and a lot of the build team got together and worked on that and created a really awesome result. And again, all those people are volunteers, and we really appreciate their help. And it's all just part of the teamwork that makes our animations possible.
Now, you've also made, I have just pulled up here the staff. You've also made a couple weapons. You made a staff and a sword. Talk to us. Why'd you start with this staff here?
The staff and sword were actually made around the same time. In the trailer, I saw that there was magic used, and we saw that there were some swords and medieval type era weapons used. And I decided that in the story, I wanted to have one character be more of like a physical based character, one character be more of like a ranged based character, more magical. And part of that comes from me being a Final Fantasy player and taking some inspiration from that,
Of
kind of
course.
the physical and then the magical. But I also wanted to have diversity and play, and just that opens up a lot more creative freedom for me to play around with how they're going to fight off mobs, how they're going to use their power, and just more creative story freedom with that.
Yeah, and speaking of magic, we're going back into you as the gamer for a second. Magic has been one of those things that this community, our community, the Game Gurus, has talked about at length. We have full blown documents of community members who are like, "This is how I want Magic to be." What does a successful Magic system look like to you?
Um, my largest point of reference is going to be Final Fantasy. I actually play mages all the time, so we have like three different mage classes. But a successful Magic to me balances your ability, because magic casters are typically ranged, so they do have an advantage. So magic in games typically is A, high potency like damage, but then B, also kind of squishier players, like less armored and more of like a support class. So I would say magic is more for like if you're using magic as more of like a support role, then I think that that's typically where games would incorporate magic.
Now, what are your thoughts on the fact? So we've pretty much figured out more or less. I don't want to say anything is certain because there's so much information we don't know about the game.
Right.
But we've kind of figured out that the game is going the route of weapon-based progression, right? So the staves that
Right.
you see, the red staff that you had created, it's a fire-based staff. You can shoot out a fireball. You know, that to us seems a little bland, seems a little boring. What are your thoughts on that?
In games that I've played, like even Minecraft, you start with wood, you go to stone, you go to iron, you go to diamond. In Final Fantasy, you start out with your lower level items, you go to higher level items. Now in Final Fantasy, all of them have their unique kind of customized looks, and they all look pretty cool. But I think that weapon progression is needed in games, just because you need to use one tier of weapon to get past like a certain level, and that's kind of in all games. Like as you progress, you get better and better weapons typically. So I think that's actually pretty normal, and I like to see that. In the animation as well, my characters are going to start out with kind of basic bland weapons. What you're seeing there is the kind of in-game end of animation staff. He's going to start out with just this kind of wooden twig type thing to begin with, and then he's going to come across that later on in the animation, so it's going to again kind of be like an upgrade. But I think that's actually going to be a good part of the game, just to help with the progression factor, and then signifying like what's in game, what's the end goal, like what am I trying to get at the very, very end, what's the most powerful weapon.
Absolutely. Yeah, and so magic is one piece of the puzzle, right? There's also melee
Right.
combat, there's also ranged combat. Is there anything specifically in the combat sphere? You mentioned you're a mage, so is magic what you're most looking forward to in terms of combat?
I'm looking forward to all of it, honestly, like seeing how the game plays. The little clip in the trailer that they had, the guy like chopping the Trork, I guess it was, and then blocking with the shield. I'm interested to see how they really do all that, all the combat, because Minecraft is very basic. It's just like 90% of what you're using is a sword, unless you have a bow. But like in combat and player versus player, you're always using swords. You're always in the same armor. You're always just fighting it out with swords. But I think that Hytale could do a lot with diversity, like have things that magic users could have certain advantages over the other two, or range users could have certain advantages over the other two, rather than it being just melee, 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 melee.
Right.
And
Stefan here has a great question. How hard is it to animate magic abilities?
that's actually probably easier than physical, because all that is some fancy particle effect usually, or some texture, and then you just give it some glowy effects. You play around with some stuff in the compositing, or the node tree rather, and oh, my computer just blacked out. That's actually probably one of the easier things to do. It takes longer to make sometimes, but it's also pretty much the favorite part of a lot of our jobs, is making really cool magic effects and stuff like that.
So break it down layer by layer, or as close to that as you can. So say there's a fire spell that needs to happen. Where would you start in terms of animating something like that?
Okay, so first I would have a character maybe like pull back a staff, get ready to cast, and what I would do is have a particle system start to generate like small kind of burning ember particles around the staff, like he's charging up his attack. Then I would have, probably in this case I'd use all particles, and when he goes for the cast, I'd have a stream of particles shoot out, and then when it collides, have like a particle bursts at the point of impact, and then kind of have some tendrils go out, or have some kind of cool fire explosion effect. What I could do is also create a texture on a plane that looks like fire or smoke or something, and animate those to have some sort of background effect. There's a lot I can do. A lot of it can just be done with the Blender particle system that I use right now. That's kind of how I would do magic, a lot of particles.
And Redacted here has kind of a follow-up to that. If you get to choose your own magic, what are you most looking forward to in terms of like a magic school to animate?
Magic school?
So like fire, ice, shadow, poison. What do you think you're gonna try and branch out into something new, or stick with kind of the basics, fire and ice?
I always play. I made a black mage in Final Fantasy. I always like the kind of shadow magic. So
Nice. And we know that
I'll
the
probably
void
be
is
playing
going to
around
be a
with
big part of Hytale.
that. Right. I kind of like to play the edgier kind of borderline good bad classes. So I think I'm going to be going towards like void, shadow, kind of learn how that is, kind of dark artsy type stuff.
You're so edgy, man. And then who's that kid who came into the chat late, asked any long-term plans for Hytale animation? You mentioned kind of you're working on a small secret project right off the bat, but
Right.
long-term, what do you think in terms of BPS? I know not everybody is interested in Hytale, but are there any long-term big picture plans for Hytale?
I think I mentioned this a little bit earlier. One thing that I'm really looking forward to is kind of going back to how BPS started with Machinima, and with Hytale in-game stuff that you can do with content creation and like movie making. You can do a lot of cool expressions and different scenes in the game, and you can film that, and that's a whole lot easier than animating each character individually, animating each movement, and that takes forever, where you can just have people body acted out. And I see that being a large part of, if we move to Hytale, I see a lot of us going back to Machinima, but I also see a lot of us incorporating animation still, So some people like to do animations more, and me personally, I want to do like a machinima animation hybrid. So like I do a lot of the story in machinima, but when it comes to like a really hyped up moment when you're about to fight or about to fight some big boss or something, I'd go into an animated and I'd animate like maybe a 2 minute fight scene or whatever, and that would serve to add a lot to the story while also still keeping it a manageable production if I'm making something 40 minutes long.
Right. And explain to everybody, just because again, I want to make sure everybody totally understands what we're talking about here. What's the difference between machinima and animation?
So machinima is done in game. You have people body act, which is basically you're filming them or someone is filming you, and you have people running around. And then you put voiceovers or texts. Exploding TNT is a really big Minecraft machinima channel, and Black Plasma has some Halo machinimas. And what, as you can see there, everything is shot in game, and voiceovers or textovers are put in after in when you're editing the video. So that's machinima. Animation is when you're hand animating everything and you control all the characters' movements. You're not relying on a game engine to do anything.
So it's more of so machinima is more performance based, while animation is more kind of you and your computer assets,
Right.
things like that.
Yep.
And Loki, one of the contributors to our channel, mentioned Red versus Blue. That's a very popular machinima.
Oh, that's a very popular machinima, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So most people
Red,
who are in,
good
was born in the 90s will know what Red versus Blue is, especially towards the beginning.
Right.
Of it. All right. So let's get to the, you're a younger guy. You got into
Right.
animation as a 15-year-old, I think you said.
Yep, that's when I started.
What would be your biggest, what would be something that you would like to tell a budding animator? What are some lessons that you've learned early on that will help them get to where they want to be as an animator?
So when I first picked up Blender, all I did was just play around with animation a little bit, but the software really scared me. And one thing that I said to myself, I'm like, even though I understand nothing of what I'm looking at, I don't know what all these tabs mean, all these options mean, I'm going to give it 1 month and I'm going to sit down every day for at least an hour. And I'm going to learn this software. I'm going to learn all the little things that you can do with it. And the main advice I would have for a new starting animator, no matter how young you are, you can just sit down, just be consistent with it. And little by little, you learn more and more. And now I look back and realize like how much I've learned just by sitting down in Blender and trying out different things, sometimes not even related to animation. And I can still learn stuff that contributes to my overall product. But yeah, just be consistent with it. Sit down every day or every other day or something, and just keep working on it because practice makes perfect, especially for animation. Like I can't stress that enough.
Any horror stories that you've experienced, like losing all your files? Anything crazy ever happened to you during your whole journey so far?
There was one time where I was working on my first animation. I was getting really, really close to release. It was the third scene of my animation where they're all just kind of looking up at this night sky after it's been corrupted. And then it came to a point where I just couldn't open up the file.
Oh,
So it took a couple of days to figure out a solution. We tried importing the world file into another Blender file, and all the animations got messed up and all the textures got messed up. So eventually I found out how to use what's called a dot blend 1, and what that is like what Blender does is saves a stable copy of your animation to a different file. So I opened that up and I was able to, after multiple crashes, diagnose what the problem was, and it was actually all the stone blocks in the world for whatever reason. So I deleted those, manually placed back the ones that could be seen, and it worked. That took a couple days. It was really scary, especially being so close to the end of release. We also have a kind of bloopers, glitches compilation on Black Plasma Community of a lot of things that we see that just go wrong in everyday animation. Sometimes we'll have really weird bugged out renders. I think I sent you a couple of those too.
Let's see here. Which one do you want me to open up? We'll look at it really quick.
I guess is there one where like the girl's in the house and just kind of bugged up?
I got barrier shatter, Elkin rendered, Elkin unrendered, render glitch. Is that it?
Render glitch, yeah, that's it. Yep.
This is great. So explain to people what's going on here.
All right. Let me look back in my folder because stream is not updated yet to see what that one was, but
should be popping up any second now. It's kind of half rendered.
Yep. Okay, that one there. So that one was actually a really cool mistake, just because of how it outlined everything. But what happened there, we're not entirely sure. When it renders, sometimes when it puts on a compositing layer, it doesn't do something right, and that one just kind of came out all weird and lined and stuff. So what we had to do there is just simply re-render the frame, and it came out fine. But sometimes when we're going through and we're working, we come up with some really weird stuff. And part of why learning the software that you're working with is so useful, like sitting down and just learning things that are other than animation, is that you're going to have to do a lot of troubleshooting along the way, because you're never going to have a project that goes 100% perfect. You're going to get everything clean. Blender's never going to crash. There's always going to be something that comes up. And recently, I think in February, I had a problem where I'd be getting a blue screen of death like every 2 hours when I'm working on something.
Oof.
So I just had to autosave, set my autosave to once every minute, because I did end up losing a couple hours of progress there. I did end up full wiping my computer, and it got somewhat better. Haven't had any problems recently, so hope that holds. But yeah, I haven't lost too much progress, and Blender being a really good software, like it autosaves, and I haven't lost much with Blender itself. And I haven't had too many problems with Blender, so I don't have any super horrific stories. But yeah, you'll run into incidents if you use Blender or any other software really that come up, and you just have to troubleshoot, and it is a little spooky for a little bit.
All right, so we have a couple minutes left. I want to just talk about this screen right here, which is kind of the full scope of, I think, the full scope of what you do as an animator. We've got all sorts of files on the left, or layers on the left with keyframes. We've
Right.
got a lot going on here. So take us through this at the most basic level, what we're looking at here.
So what you're seeing here is actually a deleted scene from my past Paradise Lost animation. I thought it was just a really good one for reference point. So what you're seeing there on the far left, that's the dope sheet, and the what you're seeing there is all the keyframes in the animation. So what those are is when I move a character, any part of the character, I set a keyframe at a certain point in time, and that controls the character's movement. So what you're seeing on the left, all the diamonds, that's a map of all the character movements. The dope sheet, which is just below that, is kind of scrunched down, has a little plus sign with the 124. That's where all the animation curves are going to be. That's how smooth the motions are and how fast they're moving in whatever direction. The window in the middle, that's where your scene's going to be. That's where your camera's going to be. The top right is my camera, the camera view. And I typically use the middle screen to kind of fly around and animate characters. In that scene, those two were just walking along, and the camera was just kind of panning and following them as they were walking. The bottom is the timeline. That's where you're gonna look to keyframe all of your movements, because every 30 keyframes is 1 second since we do 30 FPS. And on the far right is going to be all of your just kind of customization options. You can see like we render in 1080 by 1920 or 1920 by 1080. You can see that my like where I'm outputting the folder to and all the other things. And like you can see I have world background check and outside outline selected check. So that's just all kind of user interface stuff. Yeah, that's the Blender screen. That's what I'm working with 90% of my day. And if there's any unclarity there, just ask me real quick and I can explain it.
Well, I think the thing is, conceptually everything sounded really reasonable. We started the conversation talking at the most basic level about you as an animator, what you do, but then you get to something like this, and as somebody said in the chat, their brain kind of melted. Right. So,
Right.
so you mentioned that you sat down every day for an hour, at least an hour, to try and work on that. And so, when you first start a project like this, where would somebody start? It wouldn't even start here, right? It would start with the character
No,
creation, the
you would not start
rigging.
here.
Right.
Yeah. So what you would do is my first project I started, and it was a 10-second long animation. And what I did was I had a very small platform. I had one character and I had a block in his hand. And all I did was I had him walk and I had him place a block. Nothing of this scale. This is a full-blown world. This is like from a server, and I have multiple people in the background. They're like all animated. They're all talking to each other. They're walking along. This is all lit, composited. No, you're not going to be doing any of this. You're not going to have a background. Your screen's going to be mostly gray. Your focus is just going to be your character and whatever couple of objects you have in a scene. And what you're going to do is you're going to build off that. You're going to work on animating that, because jumping into something like this, it's scary. And when I first started playing with Blender, I saw that other people were working with stuff like this. I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm never going to understand any of this. And you can see like off to the side, there's like main body 14, 15, 16, 17, and then like tons of little buttons off to the side. You're not going to understand what any of those do, and you're not going to need to for a while. And Blender actually surprisingly has a pretty good learning curve, just from personal experience. But I would say if you're a budding animator, just focus on your animation, and the rest will come with time. And the other thing is ask for help and watch videos, because through those two things, that's where you're going to learn the rest of the stuff.
Awesome. Well, guys, I don't want to keep the stream going too long. You know, I like to keep it to an hour. Knight, thank you so much. I hope to have you back as we get a little bit closer to Hytale. I think we're going to have a lot more to talk about once we learn more about tools and things like that. But thank you so much for coming on the stream.
Oh, sure. Thanks for having me. It was a
And
pleasure.
of course. And guys, if you have any questions, leave them in the comments section. We're now connected a little bit with Black Plasma Studios. I've been talking a lot with Knight. So as we learn more stuff, we'll get Knight back. Maybe we'll get some of the other Black Plasma Studios people onto the stream. And Knight, man, again, thank you. I just can't thank you enough. This was awesome.
Oh, yeah. Thanks for having me. This was awesome talking about it and getting involved in kind of the more Hightail speculation and just talking about Black Plasma in general. And I'm excited to get connected with the community.
Awesome, guys. Well, you know we'll be back next week. Don't know who we're going to have on yet. We'll see. We're going to try and start getting some bigger people like Knight of Doom onto the Sunday stream, just so we kind of keep things ramping up as we get closer and closer. And hopefully a beta is somewhere in the fall or winter, possibly. Who knows? But anyways, guys, my name is Kodiak. And from everyone here at the Game Gurus, thanks for watching and play on.